Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. We're glad you're here. As we allow attendees a few moments to join our event, we'd like to share some information about the Kentucky SBDC. As the only statewide nationally accredited program that provides entrepreneurial and business development services, the Kentucky SBDC plays a vital role in the Commonwealth's economic development by assisting entrepreneurs at every stage of their business lifecycle. For almost 40 years, the Kentucky SBDC has assisted emerging and growing businesses by providing professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to make sound business decisions in a complex and ever-changing marketplace. We do this at no cost to our clients, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, who co-sponsors our program, which is then administered by the University of Kentucky, and who partners with regional universities, colleges, and local economic development agencies. We're part of a national network, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 centers across the nation. All right, to learn more, please visit us at KentuckySBDC.com, or you can email us at info@KentuckySBDC.com, or give us a call at 1-888-475-7232. Recording of today's presentation will be emailed to you this afternoon. And if you'll look to the right of your screen, you'll find the chat feature. If you have any questions for our presenter, you can post them there, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So please try that out right now. Say hello and let us know where you're joining us from. I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director here at the Louisville Center. The Louisville Center is one of 13 centers throughout the Commonwealth. And with me today is my good friend, David Pierce, who is a great resource. He is a CPA. He's been a lot of stuff. He's been a bank president, and most recently, he is a certified Petra coach, which is a great methodology. It comes out of Vern Harnish and his Gazelle's strategic plan methodology. It's really a great tool. So. After we get done today, make sure you connect with David because he's got a lot of resources. He can really help you scale your business. So with that, David. Oh, no. Well, it looks like David is having some trouble there. So we had a little trouble with him getting on here. So hopefully he'll be back here in just a second. So welcome, everybody. Here he comes. While you guys are adding and saying hello in the chat, and while we're waiting for David to pop back on here, hopefully he'll get back on here in a second. I wonder if maybe we have we've got to have a lot of cool guests coming up for the upcoming year. But if you have any suggestions of topics that you want me to find for you, I'd be happy to do so. Go ahead and put that in the chat and let me know. And there's David. So David, I'm going to turn the reins over to you.
All right, David.
And we're just going to go for it here. So
yeah.
So just a little setup here. As an entrepreneur, we generally will sacrifice anything and everything for our businesses, and we forget to take care of ourselves. And I've personally experienced this where you go all in and you kind of forget about what you need to do for yourself. So I thought it would be good to have David to come back and visit us and kind of talk about this, because you can do both. And if you're careful, you can do both successfully. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Okay, Dave, take it away for us.
All right, David, thank you. I always expect the unexpected. We've had a little technical difficulty. Hopefully it's going to flow well now, but appreciate you all hanging in there with us today. This is an area that I'm extremely passionate about, because in coaching companies, I see this crisis of personal finances evident in a lot of business owners and a lot of their team members. So we began to make a focus in our practice to talk about this when we go in and coach companies, because we know you can't separate the personal side from the business side. So it's so important that we not neglect our personal side at the expense of our personal relationships. I think this is the unspoken crisis in America today. Is a cause of lots of anxiety, relationship issues, and I believe it's the biggest potential killer, because we get trapped living paycheck to paycheck, and We're not able to look at opportunities that may present themselves along the way, either in your business or maybe there's a new job out there, or maybe you want to start a new business and we can't do it because we're so afraid to give up this paycheck and take some risks. So I think it's so important that we spend time focusing on our personal finances as much as we do our businesses. So that's what today is about. So I want to kind of go into some things. First of all, David Pierce, you're on a previous webinar. You may have already seen me, but do take down my email address, david@petracoach.com, and I'll have this slide at the end as well, because there are a couple of worksheets that I'd be glad to send you if you want to just send me an email after the session that I'm going to go through today that may be helpful if you want to get serious about your personal finances. So today we're going to talk about, I'm going to kind of build my case and why I think this is a crisis, and I don't think there's any doubt about it after you see these statistics, that there's a problem in America today with our personal finances. I'm going to go over some budgeting, which is the first step you're going to need to take to begin to get control. We're going to talk about emergency funds. My goal is to get you off dependency on credit cards, so you've got funding to meet emergencies and your ongoing needs. And then we're going to talk a lot about getting out of debt, which is very unconventional. Kind of the American way is to get in debt and you get the life you want now, you deserve it. And I think that's the big problem we've got into. And the credit card companies have not been our friend here. And I'm going to show you some statistics in that area. And then we'll talk a little bit, there's some other things in personal financial planning that I just want to hit some highlights on that I think are important to everyone. So I'm going to show you some statistics here, and I think these will speak for themselves. But every time I look at these, I get very upset with the possibilities that are extinguished because we haven't taken our personal finances seriously. So some debt facts here. In 2019, American Express and Capital One spent $2.8 billion and $2.2 billion respectively on advertising. They spent a lot of money. That's just two of the biggest ones. There are other ones out there as well. You see them on advertising, Super Bowl commercials, at your TV shows, online, they're everywhere. And the reason is their annual income haul from credit cards of all the companies was $170 billion. So a pretty good return on their investment. And they know it works, and they know if they can get you connected and trapped, you stay with them a long time. Average consumer debt is estimated around $40,000 to $50,000 on average. Average income in America is around $57,000. So you got as much debt as you got income, which means you're probably living beyond your means. There were 750,000 annual personal bankruptcies. And when times are bad, back in 2010, when we're in a recession or a downturn in the economy, those things double. So again, another problem in the American dream right now. This next bullet is so important, and this astounds me. 78% of American families live paycheck to paycheck. 4 out of 5 families live paycheck to paycheck, meaning they cannot stand a single hiccup in their income, or they're in trouble, or likely then they have to go to the credit card to pay some of their ongoing just daily living expenses, which is not the thing to do. Very disturbing, very disturbing. And then most people live in debt prison all their lives. And I'll show you a chart in just a second that shows even up to about when you're going to die, you've got a lot of debt still on your personal balance sheet, which to me is not the way to live. So we'll go through some of that. Here's some debt facts. Interesting, very interesting here, both consumer and mortgage by these different age groups, Gen Zs, millennials, Gen X. What I want to point out is the trend. The older you get, the more debt you end up having. And to me, that doesn't logically make sense, because hopefully as you get older, you become more and more successful and you make more money and you control your life better. I would think the natural thing is you would become less in debt, and that is not the trend. So as you get older, right, so far in the American way, we're getting deeper and deeper into debt. And this is a really telling chart. This is the average debt per age group of all the people that have debt. That previous slide encompassed everybody. So there are a lot of people that don't have any debt. So it lowered the average. This is only people in these age groups that have debt. Look at this. This is disturbing. In the 40 to 55 range, they've got almost $600,000 in debt. These are the peak earning years likely for this age group, and they're only growing their debt load when I would think they should be paying down their debt load if they're making more. Another one very disturbing, 55 to 64. This is the groups that's getting ready to retire, and they're going to retire with over $500,000 in debt on average, which means their retirement income, Social Security and whatever they put away, has got to service that debt. That's a problem because your income typically it goes down when you retire, and it becomes more and more difficult to service debt. So just a very disturbing slide. So there is a crisis out there. The American dream, in my opinion, from a personal financial standpoint, is not what it used to be or what it's cracked up to be. So we need to get intentional about this. Are Americans ready for retirement? Again, just more information, but 35% of U.S. households have no savings for retirement. A third of households have no savings. And those that do, the median is only $1,100, not going to get you very far in retirement. In this last slide, 56 to 61, this age group only has about 25,000. It's going to be very difficult to live and service your debt on your retirement savings and Social Security at these levels. So the time to get serious is now. Hopefully, the younger you are, the better off you can be. But it's not a lost cause, no matter what age you're in. More than half of Americans will retire broke. 34% have no savings, 21% have less than 10, and so on. So hopefully I've built the case. There is a financial crisis out there on the personal side that we need to begin to be more intentional about fixing. So, all right. So I've showed you all these statistics. You say, David, thanks, man. Appreciate it. You got me depressed. You know what? Now what? Well, that's a wake-up call. So now we can do something about it. It's time for us to take control and show money who's boss. First thing you got to do is get on a budget. That is the lifeline. That is what you have to do to get control of your finances. If you're just spending money until you run out, you are not in control of your monies. With a budget, you are the master. Without a budget, it controls you. Impulse spending, emergencies that come up, you got to spend money. You don't have any control over those kind of things if you're not budgeting and preparing for those things. So you've got to have a budget. And the practice that I help companies or help coach individuals and companies on is a practice called zero-based budgeting. I make a statement where every dollar has a name. And what that simply means is you budget typically on a monthly basis. Most people budget on a monthly basis. So every dollar you bring in during the month from your income gets allocated somewhere. It goes to living expenses, it goes to debt service, or it goes to savings. You never have just an excess balance sitting in your checkbook. Everything gets spoken for. That keeps you from being tempted. You end up at the end of the month with a little balance in there to go out and blow it on something, which isn't a good lifestyle decision. So in this budgeting process, every dollar that comes in has a name on it and gets allocated somewhere. A few things you need to think about when you're budgeting. You need to protect what we call the four walls, the minimal things you've got to have to live: food, utilities, shelter, and transportation. So those take priority. You've got to have food for you and your family. You got to have heat, water. You got to have a shelter, either rented or maybe you own something and maybe you have a mortgage on a house. And transportation, if you've got a job, you're going to need to be able to get to the job. So you've got to have that as well. So those four things kind of take priority when you're creating your budget, and then everything else kind of after that. You're going to create a new budget every month. What I mean by that is you're going to sit down at the end of a month. You're going to look back at the previous month and say, how did I do on each line item in your budget? I went over on this one. I was under on this one. How can I adjust my budget? And you're going to create a new budget. This is a discipline that I want you to have because it builds good habits. So if you just set up a budget and it stays the same every month, you're not doing any critical evaluation of how you're doing. So create a new budget every month. It's going to take you 3 to 4 months if you've never budgeted before to kind of get a hang of it and get the numbers right, estimating utilities and estimating food costs, that kind of thing. So basically, it's a monthly routine where you're going to go in and you're going to establish a new budget based on the information you've learned from the previous month and create a new budget for that month going forward. Here's an unconventional thing I talked about. Credit cards are in the past. This is good wisdom. It's not conventional wisdom, but it's good wisdom, believe me. You can live without credit cards. And by being intentional about your finances, you can get to that point. So part of the mantra of what we coach is you want to eventually get credit cards out of your life. You're going to use cash or debit card, which comes out of your checking account, or checks for all of your purchase. You're going to pay your bills that way. It's all going to come out of your checkbook or checking account or use cash. There are certain expenses that you're going to have that don't happen every month, like maybe car insurance is paid every 6 months, or maybe real estate taxes are paid once a year. You're going to budget those every month, some piece of, we call that the sinking fund. You're going to sink money into a fund over some period of time. So when the expense arises, you've got the cash to pay for it. Instead of waiting till that car payment or till that car insurance payment is due and you haven't saved anything for it. So for those non-recurring, non-monthly expenses, you're going to create a fund. You're going to fund those pro rata over whatever period of time. So you've got the cash to pay for that when it comes. So you got to anticipate that. So you kind of got to go look, got to do some thinking. The first time around, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of thought process to think about all those things. The word you got to get used to, again, if your finances are out of control, is sacrifice. Your goal is you're going to have to downsize everything you can to get your life, your financial life back in order. So how do you create a zero-based budget? Kind of already talked a little bit about it. First of all, you're going to just get a manual pad of paper, basically, to start with, and write down all your income from your job. Maybe you've got some, maybe a little small business or a side hustle out there. Maybe you get child support, everything you're going to get in a given month. And if you have a month, if your income's variable, I would recommend you use a lower conservative amount and attempt to live within that amount. And then if you make more, that's kind of gravy at that point in time. So if you have variable income, use a conservative number. Don't overestimate that. And then you're going to do the same thing for your expenses. I always recommend when I sit down, primarily I work with couples, we'll look back at 3 months of expenditure. So we'll look at the checkbook, credit cards if they were using it, whatever they used to pay to live with. And we'll look at three months of it. And we can get a pretty good feel for what all the line items are in a given budget. Utilities, they're going to vary a little bit. So we come up with an estimate of that. Food cost, transportation costs, whatever. So you take about 3 months of history and you analyze that and you come up with what you believe is an appropriate budget line item for each of those items. And again, you've got seasonal expenses, things that don't occur every month. You got to budget those. So if you have a $600 car insurance payment that's due every 6 months, then you need to budget $100 a month for that car expense and put that into what we call a sinking fund. And then you're going to subtract those expenses from your income, and your goal is to get that to at least zero. It'd be good if you had excess income, but the minimum is you've got to get to zero. You've got to control every dollar that comes in. You've got to get to a point where you can live within your dependable means. All right, so you go through that and you say, I get this question all the time. David, what if my expenses exceed my income? Good question. It's a problem. Maybe you should go into politics. They're pretty good at spending a little more than they have, but sorry, had to use that one more time. Hopefully you won't see that anymore, but politicians are notorious for spending more than we bring in, and we live in a deficit. So we don't want you to live in a deficit. So here's the hard part. This is the hard part. It does take time. You have to get ready to sacrifice and live within your means, and you have to look at every expense, and you have to decide if that is a need or if it's a want. If it's a want, then it's got to get axed. It's got to go away. So that cable TV, that HBO subscription you've got may have to go away if you're living beyond your income. So wants get axed, needs get reduced, which means you go from name brand products to generic products. You don't shop at Starbucks anymore for coffee. You make it at home. You cut your cable and your other subscriptions out that are unnecessary. You eat in. You don't dine out. I mean, this is hardcore sacrifice to get you to the point where you can control your money and live within your means. So yes, you're going to have to quit eating out 4 days a week. Yes, you're going to have to buy generic. You're not going to stop and get that Starbucks every morning. It all adds up, and you're going to have to take some very hard steps to get you to that point if you are living out of control right now. And you may need to find some more money. It may be a point where you've got minimum expenses in your budget and you're still outside of having enough revenue or income to pay for that. So maybe you need to come up with more money. Maybe you need to first sell some stuff. Everybody's got stuff laying around their house, treadmills they never use anymore, or bikes or equipment or whatever it is. Sell this stuff. There's good ways to do that now through eBay and different services. You can easily sell things. So raise some money, pay off some debt, free up that cash flow. Maybe you need to take a second job. This is always another hard conversation. Maybe you need to take a second job for some period of time. I'm not talking about for a lifetime, but you may have to sacrifice and take a second job part-time to get enough money to get your life in order. Maybe you need to go be that Walmart greeter. Maybe you've got a skill set that you can develop a side hustle with and do it on the side. A skill set, maybe if you're an IT person, you can go out and do some consulting on the side and raise some money that way. A lot of teachers now have taken up tutoring through this pandemic, and they've created an income stream through tutoring in the evenings above and beyond their teaching salary. So maybe you need to do this. Again, this is a decision you make now so that you can get yourself to the other side of this financial crisis and create that side hustle. So got to do that. You got to make some hard calls. Let me show you a little template that I've got. And again, if you want this, I'll be glad to send it to you. This is just an Excel spreadsheet, and it's manual, but you would kind of just helps you think through all the different line items of things you might have expenses for. And what you would do is just go when you're creating your first budget, look at, what am I going to do for how much do I spend in gas for my utilities every month? I've looked at the last 3 months, and there's 100 here, 125 and 90. So let's use 100. So you go in and you put $100. And that's how you go through that process. Think through all these things. You may have some other things that are on here. This is pretty comprehensive, but you may have some other things. You have a car payment that's, $400. So create the budget. And then you're going to come down. You're going to have some income up here. You're going to have, $2,000 in income. So if you do this worksheet, it comes and tells you how much budget you've got left once you've keyed in your expenses. So you could kind of use that as a running total to get to where you got. Remember, the goal at a minimum is to get to zero here. Income equals your expenses. So this will help you think through the process. And then as you go through the month, you're in there, now you're going to use this budget for the next month. I would advise like once a week, you go in and update your actual spend in each of these categories. So for gas, maybe you paid $50 so far in the month. So every month, every weekend, let's say, sit down and kind of update all these things so you can compare to how you're doing actual versus budget. That'll build that discipline process. A better way to do it is there's all kinds of apps out there and online tools you can use. One I use with most of the families that I coach is Every Dollar. It's going to cost you $120 or something like that a year, but it's well worth it to keep you on budget. And what you do is you link your checking accounts, and if you got credit cards, into the software, and it pulls all the transactions to you, and you categorize them. So it'll basically update your actual to budget real time, and you can go in easily on a weekend and spend a half hour and kind of looking at those things to see how you're doing. Much easier if you do that. So if you're going to get serious about this, I would advise that you can do it manually, but I would advise you to look at those apps. Every dollar is one that we use. So, all right, I have lost my PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, thank you. All right, so that's the template. If you want that template, send me an email. I'll send you my email, and I'll get that out to you. The next thing you do, and this is really simultaneously with you while you're creating your first budget, you need to establish an emergency fund. Here's why. 6 in 10 Americans could not pay for an $1,000 expense, emergency expense. Car breaks down, appliance goes out, something happens, a medical expenditure. 6 out of 10 couldn't afford that. So we want you to not have that anxiety. So recommend you have a minimum $1,000 emergency fund that sets in a liquid account, a checking account, a money market account, so you can get access to that. Do this immediately while you're creating your budget. So this is kind of outside the budgeting process. As soon as you can create this fund, you need to. Here's how. You just got to go find some money. Again, yard sales, eBay, side hustles, whatever it takes to come up with $1,000, put that aside. That'll give you peace of mind. And more importantly, that will prevent you from having to depend on the credit card when that appliance goes out. We want to get you away from that, from using credit to solve your problems. So if you got this $1,000 fund, you've got it. And then when you use a piece of the fund or the fund, then you immediately begin to restore that fund. So always have a small emergency fund of about $1,000 set aside to meet those curveballs that life's going to throw at you. And you've got to come up with it. You know, yard sales, sell something you don't need, maybe a one-time consulting job, whatever it is. All right. So you've got the budget process going. You're beginning to start that. You've got an emergency fund. So those are 2 of the steps. The next step you're going to do is get out of debt prison. I showed you that slide of people are dying with $500,000 in debt. So we don't want you to be that person as you get to retirement age and you realize you still got to service, $500,000 in debt. Let's not have that. Let's get out of debt and begin to live the life we really want. So the method we recommend is called the debt snowball. It's let me give you the visual here. If you ever rolled a little snowball at the top of a hill and you started rolling down the hill, as it goes down the hill, it gets bigger and bigger and picks up speed. Well, that's the method we're going to use. We're going to start small and we're going to get big as we go down the hill. Meaning, as we pay off debts, we have more free money to continue paying off bigger and bigger debts. So here's the method. First step, you got to have more income than you have expenses. That's kind of a big duh, but you can't begin to pay off your debt using only the minimum payments in any big way until you have more income and expenses. I will tell you, often this doesn't happen for a couple of years for people that I work with in coaching them. They've done a good job of living within their means. And then as they get raises or they take a new job, they take that extra income. They don't increase their lifestyle or their spend, and they use that to begin to pay down their debt. So you may not be able to do this immediately. Let's get a balanced budget first and have this emergency fund. And then as things improve, hopefully you begin to make more money at some point in time, either you and your spouse together. Then you use that extra income to begin to pay down your debts. So once you're there, you say, all right, it's 2 years down the road. I'm now making more money than I'm spending. So I'm going to start this method. So you list all of your debts from smallest to largest, along with the minimum payments for each of those debts. And you begin to attack the smallest debt first. So whatever excess income you've now created goes to pay off that small debt till it's paid off. And you take all that cash flow that was going to that small debt and you begin to pay on the second debt. So all the other debts, you're only paying the minimum payments every month. That should be built into your budget. And you're going to attack that small debt. And you just go down the line, attacking larger and larger and larger debt loads till you get it all paid off. And believe me, this can really happen. And when you do that, you're going to cut off those credit cards. You're going to cancel all the accounts. You're never going to use them again. That would be the dream. So any new income or savings that you come up with goes to begin to pay off the debt. That's the next step. Okay, let me show you. I've got one more worksheet. Again, I would be glad to send this to you if you want a copy. So it's called the Debt Snowball Calculator. Let me just kind of walk you through this. This is really, really cool. And hopefully will empower you and get you excited about the possibilities. So this is someone who is, they've got 4 pieces of debt here. They give a $1,200 probably credit card, $2,500 credit card, $4,000 credit card, and a $12,000 credit, let's call that a car payment. These are the minimum payments. You could do this with your credit, your consumer debt, and the interest rates. You drop all that in, it'll create an amortization schedule for you. So in this example, let's say this couple, let's call it a couple, has got these 4 pieces of debt and they're committed to paying them all, but they can only pay minimum payment. Well, it's going to take them a total of 100 months, over 8 years, paying minimum balances to have all these 4 pieces of credit, pieces of debt paid off. Over 8 years if you pay only the minimums. All right, so let's go back the example here. Look at this first one over here. The first one, the smallest debt, still going to take them 68 months. Over 5 years, they're going to have that debt that they're going to be paying on if they just pay the minimum payment. Smallest one. All right, so let's say this couple, maybe they've created a side hustle, consulting gig or tutoring, and they've come up with $500 that they can depend on every month above and beyond their normal income, and it's all going to go to debt service. Look at what the power of this strategy does. If they take this $500, they continue making the minimum payments on all the other debt, but they begin to apply that $500 to the first level of debt. It gets paid off in 3 months. Then they drop into the debt 2, the second level of debt. It gets paid off in 7 months, and so on and so on. So that extra cash flow you're creating when these are paid off, you apply to the next biggest debt. So they went from 8, they're at over 8 years to get all this debt paid off, to now using this extra $500 a month in 19 months, about a year and a half, they've paid off all their debt, and now they're debt free, when it would have been over 8 years, almost 9 years doing that. That's the power of this method. And you can do this. And I've seen and read stories and heard testimonies of people that say, man, I didn't think it was possible. It was life-changing. And the more I paid, the more excited and the more creative they got with ways to find out more. They sold more stuff and raised more money and took another job, whatever it was, to get to that point. So we've got to get you there. So that is a method that we recommend you use to do that. Again, if you want this worksheet, I will be glad to get that to you. So that's called the debt snowball. All right, so you've got an emergency fund, you've got a budget you're now living with, and now we've paid off all our debt. So we're doing well. So a couple of things I want to talk about that need to be in your budget, and we get this question all the time. You know, insurance is one of those, a lot of insurance out there. What do I need, and what kind of coverages, that kind of thing. So let me go through just a few highlights of insurance that are really kind of non-negotiables that you need to have. We believe there's about 7 types of insurance that everyone needs to have, or at least seriously consider in their budgets. Homeowners, auto, life, disability, health insurance, long-term care, and identity theft. So just some quick things about each of these. Homeowner insurance, you need to cover your replacement cost of your home. You cannot stand a catastrophic incident, a fire or a or a tornado or something that destroys it, and you don't have the money to replace it. So you need to have replacement cost coverage. If you're in a flood or earthquake zone, you need to have that coverage as well if you can. And remember, deductibles make a big difference in the premium. So as you begin to get more successful with your finances, you may want to consider raising deductibles if you think you can cover those through your emergency funds. Automobile insurance, you need to have full coverage, liability and comprehensive. Collision, maybe not. If you're driving an old junker, you've taken this to heart, and you're just going to drive an old car that's just transportation for you, and it'd probably be more expensive to fix than it would be to replace. Maybe you don't need full collision. So that's one way to save some premium. Your insurance agent can have, but every state has different mandates, so be sure you meet the mandates for coverage. These two types of insurance are often misunderstood, at least especially life insurance. Life insurance is often sold as an investment. In most cases, it is not a real good investment. The returns are not very good. The commissions on these are great for the life insurance agents. Typically, when they sell you a whole life policy, it's a viewpoint, but I think you should view life insurance and disability as income replacement vehicles and not investments. Remember, in life insurance, the purpose is to replace the income that's lost in the event of death. So if you're the primary breadwinner and you die, you want to have life insurance to help your family survive with that from your loss of income. So that being said, term insurance is much more affordable. You can normally lock in terms of 15, 20, 30 years. And we think you should have anywhere from 10 to 12 times your current income. So if you make $100,000, simplistically example, then you need to have $1 million in coverage. Term insurance, keep that in force so your income can be replaced in the event of death. Disability is kind of the same thing, but it's if you become disabled and can't do your job, you're going to lose some income. So you need to have disability insurance that covers that lost income. And typically you only want to insure about 65 to 70% of your income because it's normally tax-free. So you don't have that tax element. So if you gross 100,000, typically you bring home around 65,000, let's say. So you only really need to have disability insurance if it's designed properly of about 65,000 on an annual basis. So those are income replacement insurances, not investments. Health insurance, we all know we got to have that. You can afford a high deductible plan, depending on how your budget is. Obviously, the premiums are lower. There's all kinds of options out there, primarily through your employer, but you got to have that. Long-term care, here's an interesting stat. If you reach age 60, there is a 65 to 70% chance that you're going to need some long-term type care at some point, maybe for a short period of time, maybe in the home, maybe in a nursing home or a care center. So odds are high that you're going to need this at some point in time. So as you become more successful in managing your finances, it's good to consider adding long-term care as an expense. Here's a caveat. We think you don't need to have it young, since you really don't need it until you get older. And as long as you're in good health and that continues, you really don't need to buy this until later in life, almost to the age of 60 or so. The difference in the premiums from when you start early and the higher premiums you pay at a later date, it's about a wash, or it can be even better, because you're only going to incur that premium for a short period of time the later you start. So you paid all these premiums for 20 years, let's say. Now you're only paying for 10 years even though it's a higher rate. So think about it. Talk to someone who can help give you better advice on the types of care out there. But it's a good chance you're going to need some of this coverage. And long-term care, it can be up to $100,000 a year. So it can devastate your estate or your nest egg if you don't have this. So consider that. And identity theft is just one of those pain in the rear things that's happening more and more. It's affordable. It can help you cover the cost of restoring your credit, your position. So we think it's worth considering. It's an affordable thing that's becoming more real world every day. Then there's some life planning. Get these questions. And I'm not going to get into detail. This is more for the qualified attorneys and life estate planning people. But there are some things. First of all, when you get to this point, it's worth investing or paying someone who is qualified to give you the best advice, because these tax rules and financial reasons and state reasons and all these things come into play, and they seem to change about every day. So you need to have someone qualified to help advise you on this. But simplicity, there's some things you consider. First, planning your estate. You can do nothing, which is not a good option, because when you die, you and your spouse die, you're going to leave it up to the state or the government to take care of how your estate is handled. You believe me, you don't want that to be the case. One thing you should do is hold all your assets jointly, which means if one of the spouses dies, all the assets still remain the ownership of that house. So there's no legal implications of having to transfer assets in that case, but that only works until that spouse also dies. At a minimum, you should have a will, some kind of a simple will that tells everyone involved how you want your assets to be controlled and managed. I did this. My parents both passed away. My mom was the second one, so I was in charge of the executor of the estate. And believe me, if I hadn't had that will, it would have been just a nightmare. But I was able to take the will, get the courts to approve it, and I executed the will according to the wishes. It's peace of mind. Also, you're struggling already with the emotional loss. Now you've got to deal with this financial issue. So you want to just make it easier on your relatives if you can. And if you get, hopefully you're starting early and you're going to build a huge estate, you probably want to do a little more sophisticated thing, develop some living trusts and that kind of thing. Taxes and financial aspects change all the time. So my recommendation is get good counsel. You can probably afford it at this point to help someone start your simple will, and as you advance, to maybe set some trust. Do this for your peace of mind and your families. All right, so let's review. Where are we at? All right, we budgeted every month. We've got a $1,000 emergency fund. We've been successful in paying off all our debt. It's 2 years down the road. This next item I didn't talk about, but once you get your debt paid off, we want to grow that emergency fund to about 4 to 6 months of expenses. So you've got that set in a liquid account that if something happens, a loss of job, an illness, something happens that's going to require you to miss work, miss that paycheck for some period of time, you've got the resources to help get you through that. Perfect example of this. When the pandemic hit, anybody in the restaurant business basically immediately lost their income and their job. And they really didn't come back for any 4 to 6 months in any great way before they were able to go back and work in that same position, because all the restaurants stayed closed. If these people had these reserves, the 4 to 6 months set aside, they would have been much better off to survive this storm. So once you get to your successful budgeting, your emergency fund, your debt paid off, now you want to establish the secondary living fund, basically, to cover those big things. Then you're in really good shape. You have a lot of comfort, and you don't have that financial anxiety of worrying about the unknown out there. We talked about insurance. You're covering that. You've done a little life planning, so you're doing really well. So what's next, you might say? We've got a few minutes here. I want to go over these quickly. What is next once you get to through those 4 to 5 steps? And that is the priority. Get there first before you dive into this. And again, this is a little unconventional. Well, I think it's more important that you get your finances in order, get debt free on the consumer debt before you even begin to save for retirement. That's why starting now to get to that point is so important. The sooner, the better. Once you get to this point, then you begin to sock away at least 15% of all your income in retirement. You might want to save for your kids' college. We'll talk about that. Then you're going to attack that last piece of debt. We save this to the last because it's kind of your 4 walls, your house. Then we want to get out of our last piece of debt, and that's the mortgage. And then you're going to be able to live the life that you really want out there. So from retirement, again, you start saving 15% of your income. If you're in a 401k with your employer, make sure you maximize the match. Most or many employers have a match. So if you put in 2%, they'll match 2%. So make sure at a minimum you're putting in that 2% so you can get that free money on top of your contribution. Then you want to start a Roth 401k, which allows you to get tax-free withdrawals when you retire. We think that's probably the best vehicle. Then if you maximize that, you still haven't used up your 15% of income, then go back into your 401k and continue to contribute to that. Again, if you're at this point, it pays to have a qualified financial advisor to help you with these if you're uncomfortable with it. But that's the recommendation on retirement. Save for kids' college. All we hear about now every day is this school loan dilemma that's out there. So we don't want our kids to have to go through that. It's school loan hell. And they're planning on forgiving some of it and not forgiving some of it. The bottom line is a crisis. I don't know who's to blame for it, but it is a crisis. The kids are getting out of school with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt if they go to private schools or have extended college experience like masters or doctorates. So if you decide, there are some good vehicles out there. It's called an educational savings account or 529 plans where you put money in, it earns money interest-free, tax-free, and then when it's paid out, there are no taxes on it if it's used for the proper educational expenses. Our goal is to help our kids out. We don't want them starting off behind the 8 ball if we can help it as a good parent. But remember, college is a blessing. It's not an entitlement. So junior is not necessarily entitled to go to that great private school if it's not within your income capabilities. Public is perfectly fine. And you can find some great public schools that are much cheaper than private schools. So you got to make sure it fits what you're capable of. Trade schools are a great option too. There are a shortage of trades out there. We hear it every day. And I know some very wealthy, very successful tradesmen, plumbers, electricians. So you can earn a huge living and get very wealthy doing trades. So think about trade schools if that's your affinity. Obviously, there's scholarships and grants, and thousands or hundreds of thousands of these don't get used every year. They go unused every year. And one big wake-up call. It's okay for junior to hold a job in school. For some reason, we've gotten away from that. When I went to school, I worked part-time all the way through school. So through a combination of some scholarships, some grants, and my working income, I was able to graduate with no debt coming out of college. Whereas many of my friends didn't. They had tens of thousands of debt that they had to again pay off. So that's a burden. So working through school builds discipline and gives you some financial wisdom to go with that. And again, if you're uncomfortable, make sure you get there's a lot of advisors out there can help you more with making those choices. And then the last frontier, pay off your mortgage. 100% of all foreclosures occur on homes with mortgages. And it's kind of a joke, but it's true. Until you get your mortgage paid off, you still are at the mercy of the lender in the event that you have a hiccup and you're unable to pay your mortgage. So the sooner you get that mortgage, the more you can protect your castle. So we're going to, just like the debt snowball, now you're going to use this excess cash flow once you've done all these other things we just talked about, and you're going to pay off that mortgage as quickly as possible. A mortgage is not a good tax deduction. You hear that all the time. I need the tax deduction. It's a fallacy. It's not true. It is a tax deduction, but it's not a good tax deduction. So get that mortgage paid. Get out of that last piece of debt and free yourself from debt prison. Dave Ramsey, a lot of this is based on, makes a statement: the grass at your house feels different when you own it. I think that's very true. Again, personal experience, my wife and I started early in our marriage paying off our mortgage. We had 2 careers at the time, and we were able to pay it off early. And since that time, we have not had a mortgage payment for a couple of decades now. So it's well worth it, peace of mind, to do that. So here we are at the end. Why do I want to do this? Well, first of all, I want you to live like no other. I want you to live unconventionally now. I want you to get out of debt, stop using credit cards, live within your means, put some savings aside, live like no other now, so you can live like no other later on. So you can have the life that you want. You can open up options. You can pursue passions. You're not trapped on a paycheck to paycheck struggle that most Americans, 4 out of 5 Americans, deal with. So either you control the money or it controls you. So you've got to be intentional. It takes time to create that budget and be diligent and stay accountable to that budget. Don't live life by accident. And what I mean by that is if you're just spending as bills come in and you don't have any control over what you control, what you want to spend, when that emergency hits, it's controlling you. So you're living life by accident as opposed to a well-planned life, preparing for accidents. So one way to do that is get a clear vision. If you're in your 20s, what do I want my life to look like when I retire? How much money do I want to have in the bank? Where do I want to live? How much do I want to give away? What do I want to do? Create that picture, that visual in your mind, then step back in today and begin to build a life, a plan that will get you there. I know personally, and talked to a number of people over my lifetime, we are happiest when we're able to serve others and give. And I can promise you, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can never find that kind of joy because you can't do it. So real joy and contentment comes when we're able to help others. And the only way we can do that is to have control over our finances. And I'll close with this statement, which has been key. I really love this. Hold your possessions with a loose hand so some of it falls through. So here's the visual. It's okay to be successful, to have wealth and do it right and have a nice life and have great vacations and all those things, but don't hold it so tight that none of it ever gets used to benefit your fellow man. I think that's a part of our problem in society today. It's all about me, not helping, and we're not helping others. So hold them in your hand, but let some of it fall through. And the only way you can do that is if you have been diligent in controlling, you're getting your finances in control, getting out of debt, living life within your means, putting savings aside so you don't have to worry about retirement. When you're in that position, you can be free and you can help others. And through that, you really find real joy and passion in doing those things. So that's it. So here's my email again, david@petracoach.com. Get that down. If you want those two worksheets, the budgeting worksheet and the debt snowball, I'll be glad to send that to you. I'm probably resonated with a few of you and say, man, I need to get my life, but I don't really know where to start. Obviously that's what I'm here for. I coach. So if that's something that might be of interest or you want to talk to me about it a little more, I'd love to talk to you about it. There's no commitment on your part to have a conversation. So if you think I can help you, kind of it's one of my passions in life. If I can help people on the personal side, then I get real joy and contentment out of that. So with that, I think we are right about 5 minutes to go.
Yeah. Dave, that was awesome. I just want to let you know, Manuel just says he loves this and he liked your quotes and stuff. So he said it was a great presentation. Really got a lot out of it. So quick couple questions here we need to kind of get to, but maybe you should kind of talk a little bit about this because everything you talked about also it applies, if you have a business, if you have a small business.
Absolutely. Obviously, if you can run a business without being in debt, you're that much stronger and can survive things like pandemics. I know that's not always possible, but when I look at debt with a business, hopefully you're not borrowing debt just to meet expenses. It's there is a return you're expecting on this investment. So, it's very hard, I know, to run a business and grow a business without some level of funding. Sometimes that's capital, sometimes that's debt. But if you can kind of get the mindset of never taking on debt unless you can compute some anticipated return on that, then think otherwise, if at all possible. If you're borrowing just to meet expenses, you're in the same boat as most Americans are on the personal side. So. Mm-hmm.
So that being said, Dave, is there any advice that you would give folks to mesh these two together? So budgeting from the business side to mesh with your budgeting for the personal side?
It's really the same, David. Most businesses already, if they've been around a while, they're used to doing this budget process. So it's really one and the same. You can do the same process. Create your monthly budget. If you're in a business and you're not very good at it, then go back to doing it every month and do kind of forward looking. Here's how I did in the hindsight. Here's where I want to go in the future. So it is identical methodology. This what's so wild, David. Businessmen do this every day for their businesses, but they don't do it for their personal finances. It just astounds me that they don't, but it's the same process. And you can have the same successful results if you do it on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's see. So Jill, I know you touched on this, but let's ask this again. So is it better to not pay off your low interest mortgage or to do so?
Eventually, but in those, the way I recommend is in those steps. Mortgage is something it's kind of your four walls. It's a given expense. So we don't rush to pay that off immediately. But if you get to the point, 6 steps down the line, after you've done all the things of savings and retirement and started that process, why not? Get out of debt. It's your last piece of debt. You really have real freedom at that point in time. So just even though it's a low interest rate, it's still a piece of debt that you're paying interest on. Mm-hmm. And you're not earning, if you got money in the bank, it's earning nothing right now. So there's not a trade-off in earnings there. It's better for you to not pay it off. So it's kind of, why not? To me, always the answer is why not? Once we get to this point, let's go ahead and take care of that and get it out of the way. And then you're really free at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess there's kind of like you said, there's kind of a priority, hierarchy of where you work down that. Yeah. And again, just like you said, you would use that same snowball calculation for your business as well.
Absolutely. If you can do that for your businesses, again, pandemic's been just such a great example. Businesses that were not ready for the pandemic, I don't know if anybody was, that weren't prepared from a financial standpoint, being astute and having reserves and that kind of thing, they didn't survive nearly as well as the ones that did. So you could definitely apply this to your business. And it's identical. It really is identical.
Okay. Here's a good question. Is $70 a month for home warranty covering major appliances a valid expense?
Yeah.
I have a little house.
She said. I've never had them. And if you just read any of the experts out there, they say for the most part, those are not good bets. It's a statistical thing. And they'll tell you that generally those are not good types of insurance to buy. If it's affordable and if it's a peace of mind and it's something you can easily afford, I'm not against that, but generally they'll say statistically over time, now you might be the one where your house, everything breaks down and you're glad you had it, but statistically, population wise, those tend to not be good bets.
Yeah. A good indication of that is the number of robocalls I get on a daily basis. And
how many credit card solicitations you get, Dave? I did this last time. Yeah. The day before, I got 4 credit card solicitations in the mail, either a short-term loan or a credit card. So there's a problem there. There's a problem there if you're getting these every day. There's good money, and they're going to keep. They've really educated us that we think that's really the way to get it, and it's part of our me thing. It's all about me. I deserve this, as opposed to I earned it. It's kind of a different mentality. So we got to get back to living within our means. And the credit card companies, they don't care about that. They just want to sell your credit card and get you hooked.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, it looks like about all the big questions we have here. So everybody, I encourage you to reach out to David. That's his email right there, david@petracoach.com. And, he'll send you those spreadsheets. And if you haven't really looked into Petra Coach and that coaching methodology from Vern Harnish and the scaling up methodology, it's really cool, really good stuff. And that's how I connected with Dave. He was one of the first in the area, and I think I was a stalker for you for a while there, wasn't I, Dave?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. It's and it works, and it's good sound logic for businesses, and we've seen some just unbelievable results from it. So love you. If you want any kind of question about that, I'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah. So feel free to reach out to David. And again, we'll send you a link for the replay. Watch this a bunch of times, and also you'll have all the other materials sent to you later on today as well. So with that, Dave, I want to thank you for another great presentation. This has been
David. Appreciate it.
Good. You've gotten a lot of great feedback. Diana says it was great, and So does Carla and Stuart. So
Good deal.
you really hit it hard today.
Good deal. Well, thank
Home
you guys. Let me know if I can help, and good luck, and send me your success stories. I want to hear those too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great, everybody. I hope everybody has a great Wednesday, and we'll see you next week as always. And stay safe out there and wear your mask. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.